Hello, I'm Lucy Hockings. From the BBC World Service, this is The Global Story. Today, the Indian wedding that captured the world's attention. The marriage of Anand Ambani and Radhika Merchant, it sounds more like an international stadium tour. Rihanna, Justin Bieber, Katy Perry, all performing on stage. There were events held over the course of 4 months, from the Mediterranean to Mumbai. And no extravagance was too great when Asia's richest man celebrated his youngest son getting married. But was this just about a wedding, or was it a spectacle to grab the world's attention? And what does it tell us about the lives and ambitions of India's mega-rich? With me today, Nikhil Ananda, our BBC India business correspondent in Mumbai, and Rahul Tandon, BBC business presenter and former India correspondent. Great to have you both with us.
Hi, Lucy.
Hi, Lucy. Hi, Rahul.
I want to reflect for just a moment on the last wedding that I went to, guys, which was a very small, quiet affair in the English countryside. It was a lovely day. There were maybe 30 people. What about the last one you went to?
Since coming back from India, I don't go to so many weddings anymore. I used to be going to them all the time. Didn't sometimes even know whose wedding it was. But being back in England, I think the last one I went to was a few months ago, like you, a very sedate affair.
Nico, what about you?
Yeah, well, I went to one of my cousin's wedding late last year, and I must say it was absolutely nothing like the Ambani wedding, Lucy. There were 3 functions. There was the obvious sort of pre-wedding Sangeet or, sort of musical and dance party that happens before the wedding. Then there was the actual wedding that took place, and then there was a reception. I think that really is sort of more representative of the kind of weddings that most Indians have.
That's true, Nikhil, but isn't it? They are big, aren't they, compared to maybe what Lucy is traditionally going to. My own wedding, which was a long, long time ago, what would I have? I had 3 big venues.
How many people, Rahul?
It was small by Indian standards. The first one here in the UK, about 350. Then the reception the next day, probably a similar number. Then a big functioning Calcutta, around 600 people. There's probably about 1,600 people. I can go to my wedding book and find out, because we wrote down exactly who gave what.
That is a big wedding by lots of people's standards, Rahul, but it really doesn't compare to this massive wedding we're talking about. Let's go through it. For one thing, organised by one of the richest people in the world, the billionaire businessman Mukesh Ambani, for his son and daughter-in-law. What kind of numbers are we talking about? Let's look at the big figures.
Well, look, Lucy, honestly, it's quite difficult to estimate the kind of numbers, whether it's on the spending or the people who've attended. But let me just say that, the photographs that came out of the function that actually happened in Mumbai was this massive convention center that I've been to a number of times for music programs, for instance, and that entire hall was packed. So I would sort of hazard a guess and say that definitely more than 1,000 people in Mumbai.
And what about the cost? Because it's been so controversial and we're going to talk more about it. But traditionally, when you think about a wedding, the moment you put that word in front of it, people sometimes lie and say it's not a wedding, it's just a small gathering of friends and family. Because when you put wedding in front of wedding dress, wedding cake, wedding venue, the costs skyrocket. But this surely is on a whole other scale, Nikhil.
Well, absolutely. I think it wouldn't be an understatement, Lucy, to say that this is possibly the grandest wedding that we've seen here in India. And let me say, Indian weddings, even those of non-billionaires, are very, very lavish. I remember covering, well, not actually on the ground, but, as a reporter, the wedding that happened of the daughter of Lakshmi Mittal, who was a very famous Indian steel tycoon. And it was all over the news because it happened at Chateau Versailles in France. But this eclipses that and possibly all of the weddings that have happened by the erstwhile sort of royals and maharajas. So it all started in March with that pre-wedding ceremony in Jamnagar, which is also where Reliance, or the Ambani family's flagship company, owns their big refinery. It's the largest refinery in the world. The costs, again, very difficult to estimate. Some people say it's between 150 million to 200 million. Another estimate puts it at 600 million. I don't know where it is. I mean, frankly, it's anybody's guess.
My Indian friends who are part of the diaspora in the UK said they couldn't escape this wedding on their social media feeds. So every time they picked up their phone, they were getting a new alert or a new reel. It was just absolutely constant. Rahul, I know that your daughter has given you every bit of gossip from this wedding as well. What sort of anecdotes have you been hearing from the wedding itself?
I think it's more. I think the reels are the real thing. The visualization of, because there are so many different facets of the world. Celebrities who are there, from Kim Kardashian, whether should she have been wearing red on a certain day, when that's the day when the bride is traditionally supposed to wear red. So that's caused quite a bit of gossip and outrage as well. But also the big Bollywood stars, who was going, what were the clothes that they were wearing there, whether it's Shah Rukh Khan, whether it's Amitabh Bachchan. There's just been so much of it. Clearly, whilst it is a fairly private affair, with all the reels and everything else that is out there, they do want people to see the grandeur of what's happening.
Nikhil, did you have a favourite moment? I have to say I have a good friend who was at the wedding. I felt like I had my own private sort of Instagram experience going on, because she was texting and messaging me videos and photos and experiences that she was having. And she described it as absolutely mesmerising at every turn. And I don't even think I could pick out a moment that I thought this was the kind of key magic moment from the weekend, because it felt like there were so many. But what about for you? Was there something that really stood out?
Well, I mean, in terms of sort of the bit of the anecdotes that are coming out of the wedding, I think what really caught my eye was somebody saying that there were some 2,500 dishes, and I'm a big foodie. And so apparently sort of, international cuisine representing every different province of India.
I was sent some photos of the food as well. Absolutely incredible. I mean, I would have loved to have been at just one of the meals. And I know that the pastry chef was flown over from Paris, so there were some good desserts there as well. But when it comes to the food and it comes to the festivities as well, it was a real display of Indian culture, heritage, and also importantly religion, it felt, that played such a prominent role. How much are people talking about sort of the soft power of this wedding and how much it showcased all of that to the rest of the world?
We've done quite a lot on some of the programs, the business programs, because the amount of money spent has made it a big business story. We spoke to the editor of the Tribune, which is one of the big newspapers based in the north of India, and she was talking about getting fed up of criticism of the amount of money that was being spent, and actually was much more interested in how the world was following an event that was taking place in India. And they were saying, look, this is not just a wedding. This is so much more than that. This is another example, rightly or wrongly, of India being put on the map and a different story being told about India. It is a country that's moving economically forward, and this is an example of that economic moving forward, with the richest family in the country displaying their wealth.
Because, Nikhil, that's a good point that Rahul makes. It wasn't just about showcasing India. Surely it was about promoting the Ambanis as well. I mean, they are now a household name, perhaps in a way that they wouldn't have been before.
The fact that you have somebody like Kim Kardashian coming to the wedding, I don't think she's sort of a personal friend of the Ambanis, but the fact that somebody like her comes in means the Western influences come in, means that the Ambanis suddenly become this household name in the West. And that's exactly the kind of orchestrated PR that we saw this wedding becoming for the Ambanis. Some columnists talking about the fact that they wanted to build up this kind of excitement because there's a big public float or a big initial public offering of their digital arm that's going to be happening. Other columnists talking about how this is essentially a showcase of the three children, because the Ambani empire, the Reliance empire, is going to be going through a big succession.
What was the city like? I mean, you're there. Did you have a sense that this big thing was happening?
Well, I mean, I certainly had a sense because of my social media feed, but also because, the sort of central business district of Mumbai, BKC, was completely cordoned off to people. There were traffic snarls, traffic came to a complete standstill. And what was essentially a very personal, function became a public event. However, the sort of police would defend that by saying that, just the sort of sheer number of celebrities and VVIPs in attendance would have sort of compelled them to do that. So the reaction was a bit mixed there.
We've heard that it is traditional to have hundreds of people, and the events often do go on for days. But what about these overt displays of wealth? How is that normally viewed?
We're talking about a country where inequality is at a 100-year high, according to Inequality Labs, which conducted a study just before the elections. We're talking about this at a time when the proposals for a 2% wealth tax globally because of the kind of inequity. But then in a country like India, I think this also feeds into the aspiration that people have to be rich. And certainly, I think the Ambani wedding will set some of those trends.
I think there is criticism, as Nikhil said there. But I think also people have to understand that Indians are used to living with disparity. They see it around them all the time, don't they? This is not something that they haven't seen before. I think a lot of the criticism that we see comes from sometimes outside India, from people who don't understand that this is something that people have to live with a lot of the time. But there are voices who will say, as Nikhil rightly says there, this is a reflection of a country that is growing more and more unequal, where there is a huge upper class that has developed. India has some of the highest numbers of billionaires in the world, a growing middle class as well. But beneath that, you have this 800, 900 million people who, on a daily existence, it is difficult for them just getting enough food to eat.
And Nikhil, the Ambanis did do things as well to try and offset some of that criticism.
Essentially, what they did was they went to a tribal district next to Mumbai, and they conducted a mass wedding of people who possibly wouldn't be able to afford it, themselves. So that's the kind of stuff, I guess, one has to do to counter the negative publicity or the negative PR that evidently comes with this sort of an event. Culturally, in India, it's not a big deal for people to spend a huge amount of money on weddings. There was a recent report by this brokerage called Jefferies, which actually said that Indians punch far above their weight when it comes to spending on weddings. So the per capita income of Indians is some $3,000, but most Indians spend about $15,000 on weddings.
Wow, that's big. That's big business.
That's big. And the wedding economy is valued at a staggering $130 billion. Now that's bigger than many industries.
Thank you for reminding me of that, Nikhil. I will continue to save for my daughter's wedding.
How's that extra savings account there going, Rahul?
Yeah, well, I think
now she's watched the Ambani wedding. I'm sure her aspirations are sky high.
Yeah, I'm trying to ban her from all social media and TV for about a week or so. But, I know friends who have got weddings coming up in the winter who are watching those videos incessantly now, looking at bits of it and trying to take little bits that they can put into their own wedding. Let's not forget, this is a business wedding. Go through any publication in the world, the Ambani wedding has featured. Is it worth the money they spent? Well, if you try and pay for that level of publicity globally, maybe you'd be paying more than what they paid for the wedding.
We've already reflected on the fact that it was an entertainment extravaganza at the same time as being a wedding. But the FT described it as the hottest invite in business. So can I ask you both about this man, who was quite mysterious to a lot of people beforehand, Mukesh Ambani, who sent out the invitations, who paid for the wedding. How did he, Nikhil, become Asia's richest man?
It was an empire that was actually started by Dhirubhai Ambani, who was the grandfather of the groom. He was actually a petrol pump attendant, but he built this massive petrochemicals empire. Mukesh Ambani, his son, is the one who's really diversified this conglomerate. And increasingly, he's turned this mainstay petrochemicals business into a digital consumer-led business. He's a very important man in India. And I think, this wedding was a way for him to showcase his clout to the globe.
We've got this far into the pod, and we haven't once, I don't think we've actually used the word love. Have we? Nor have we really talked about Anand or Radhika, the couple themselves. We have talked about the business of the wedding. We've talked about what it means for India. What about, Nikhil, the actual couple themselves? What do we know about their relationship?
Not too much, apart from the fact that I think they went to the same school, that they've been dating each other for quite a while, and that She also comes from a fairly affluent family. She, of course, was born to a pharmaceuticals tycoon. Of course, nowhere near as rich as Mukesh Ambani. And Anand himself, I mean, he's known to be somebody who's now going to be taking over the sort of renewables part of the Ambani empire, and somebody who loves animals. I think that's the one sort of public aspect of his personality that's very well known. He's somebody who's sort of known to have, brought stray dogs home when he was a child, and it's actually his sort of whole initiative that the family has this big sort of private zoo in Jamnagar.
Nikhil, he loves animals, but my question really is, does he love her?
I'm not going to get there.
Just say yes. Say yes.
I want to believe in the fairy tale, and there's some romance here as well.
Well, you know what, though? It's not unusual.
I think Rahul can answer that better sitting with.
Well, I mean, this is but it's a serious point, isn't it? If we're looking at this wedding as well, that marriages aren't always about love in India.
I don't think it's unusual, and this might sound strange to people, to not talk about the bride and groom. The fact that we're not talking about them, it does happen quite a lot in Indian weddings. A lot of the congratulations goes to the parents, So it isn't unusual in that way, but this isn't an arranged marriage. But it's also, I think, part of the Ambani family where they like to expose certain things that they do publicly, but the rest of it is very, very private. But it isn't what is still very common, the arranged marriage. This is a couple who've been going out together for a long period of time, so stop being so cynical, Lucy.
Rahul, you're going to dampen your daughter's expectations and aspirations. But Nikhil, can I ask you about other people who perhaps in India, parents who are planning their children's wedding? Does this add a bit of extra pressure?
This sort of stuff does put pressure in a society where already... especially the bride's family is supposed to take the onus or the burden of funding weddings in a society where dowry is still very much alive and kicking.
Nikhil, there are more billionaires in India than ever before. Is this also a reflection of the power of that group of people, what we can expect from them going forward?
Yeah, well, I think it certainly is a reflection of their power. And as, one of the commentators that I was speaking with, James Crabtree, who actually wrote a really interesting book called The Billionaire Raj, told me, the fact that, we have these VVIPs coming to this wedding just shows how strategic, billionaires like the Ambanis have become to the global operations of many companies. This sort of spending is not really reflective of the kind of money that every billionaire in India spends.
Did you see any criticism of the wedding? I don't mean that the traffic was bad, the criticism about the ostentation and the amount of wealth and money on display there when there is so much inequality. I mean, any criticism about the festivities?
No, I don't think so, not really. Indian weddings are a celebration and they are a family event. My parents planned my wedding for a long time, probably from the minute I popped out of my mum. And for them, this was a hugely important moment in their life for them, not just about getting their kids married, but greeting their friends, celebrating with their friends as well. So in terms of the festivities, no, not at all.
Nikhil, I think that's what I wanted to hear, actually, to end on. That there might be a bit of love in there, but also some joy.
And you saw that with everybody present, right?
Favourite celebrity, Rahul, who attended?
Oh, I love all the Bollywood celebrities. If I had to get one of the singers to sing at my daughter's wedding, not that I'll be able to afford it, Diljit Dosanjh, the big Indian singer, I think, he's far better than some of the other celebrities who were there.
Nikhil, what about you?
Well, not favorite, but I think I had some fun seeing Boris Johnson.
Yeah, Boris and his little boy.
Lucy, when are we going to get you to an Indian wedding? That's what we need. When the next big Indian wedding,
anyone
we've got to get
listening who wants me to come to their wedding, I'm there. And on that, Rahul, good luck with the savings account for your daughter's wedding.
Well, I'm hoping that, maybe just have a small, big Indian
wedding. A nice,
wedding.
quiet English small wedding.
I think so, Lucy. You'll be invited to that.
And please, I'll show up in a sari.
Thank you.
Rahul, lovely to have you with us. You too, Nikhil. Take care.
Take care.
Bye, Rahul.
Thank you for watching. If you want more episodes, you can find The Global Story wherever you get your podcasts. You can also subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we'd love to hear your comments, so do let us know what you think in the comments section below. Goodbye for now.